The statute caps how much an employer can put into the Utah retirement system for the hybrid program at 10%, but the cost of the program is coming in at about 10.8%. So that difference, the 0.8%, is now the responsibility of the employee to pay into the Utah retirement system. This year, we had the same challenge, and in balancing the budget, we had agreed to provide one-time monies to cover that for the employees. So what we basically do is the employee pays the 0.8%, it's 0.7 this year, but anyway, pays that percent, and then we make a equal contribution into a tax deferred account for them so that their net impact is zero as far as their employment goes. This is the cost to do that again in 2026. Typically, the funding from that does come from the WPU, so I've lined that up that way. We also have turnover savings and the Utah retirement savings. So these are the typical funding pieces that you would use for a comp package. And for illustration purposes, I drive that down to a zero, like we have enough money to do this.
What is turnover savings?
Turnover savings happens when an employee leaves the district or retires from the district and their replacement costs less. So if they're a teacher and they're on step way at the top end of the scale and we hire someone new at step one, there's a cost differential there and we capture that as a savings.
And is that where the URS savings really comes from too?
The URS savings is a rate in change. So the URS actually changed their rate for retirement.
Oh.
And so that's just a straight up rate savings.
So that one is not necessarily going to be an ongoing revenue source. That just...
It is.
Because that rate's going to stay forever. Oh,
well,
until
the next year. It's good for 12 months. But we use ongoing dollars to fund retirement. So that's why to us it's a savings, because we've already set the ongoing money aside. We just have to pay less this next year than we are this year. All right, so this is our list of programs whose money run out. We have the gang prevention, the highly impacted school stipends, the last of the money for library media and nurse match. This is the impact that we're estimating on school fees, which is better than what we thought it was going to be. House Bill 344, when it came through, actually changed a number of provisions within the school fee law and made it less expensive, if you will, for a school district to cover. And so what we thought was going to cost us something over $4 million costs us something over $2 million. So a much better situation. But nonetheless, we lose those fee revenues.
So this represents that we had, these programs were defunded, but we are going to choose to continue to fund them.
I'm illustrating what is going away. We can decide what stays and what goes.
And this is a demonstration of one way that we could continue to fund them.
Correct.
And what is that one-time state funding again?
The one-time state funding has to do with school fees.
Oh.
So they're providing
right.
a 50% calculation, 30% the next year,
out.
20% the following. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what that represents. So again, through our normal access to funds, we'd come up about $1.6 million short if we wanted to retain all of these programs. The next category is legislative impacts. We've talked about professional staff already. We also have an obligation to provide paternity and postpartum leave to our employees. This is not the paid to the employee portion. This is when they're absent from the workplace, we'll have to have a sub. So this is our estimate of what the substitute cost will be in providing additional leave for our employees. And then this is our latest modeling of what the school safety cost would be for personnel. So this is looking at a guardian model for personnel and what we would need to pull that together. Again, typically these are things that would come out of the WPU, so I'm showing that as the WPU as the funding source, and we come up short about $1 million in that category. The one-time funded items, these were decisions that we made for this school year. So for the co-teach model, additional administrators at the schools, preschool, ELL software and a kinder specialist. These were decisions that we said we were going to fund, but we only had one-time monies available to us to do that. So we're now at the end of this, or coming to the end of this fiscal year. What do we want to do about them? And on some of these, in the case of the risk management premium coming in higher than what it needed to be, if we didn't have to pay for a higher risk premium this year, we probably would have used those dollars for one of these programs. So I've put it in this bucket just because that's what naturally would have happened. We would have prioritized the dollars into these requests from last year. I have one-time monies then for the balance, or for most of the balance of this program, from the idea that the co-teach model is still in its first year. We don't have data at the end of the year to assess how well it's doing, so we probably would put that on another one-time basis for funding until we have the data to determine how well that program's going. So not an uncommon practice is to use some one-time money until a program demonstrates itself. And then we have our challenge with the preschool with the grant that wasn't awarded. Do we limp along for another year? We had a presentation at an earlier session about some measures that they've taken into account to try to reduce this cost. But we might, in the end, bridge it with one-time money until they are eligible for that state grant. At the end of the day, this one ends up about $700,000 short, looking at it that way. We have additional one-time items. These are items that Chris, you were asking about. What is that 3%? This is the superintendent conversations. And so we have a number of items that we need to take a look at that probably are more than just, oh, we had to fix something for a year. This is something that's probably ongoing. So we have the pilot that's running at Hunter. We need to determine what its future is, whether it's in place for another year or discontinues. Is it the model moving forward? We also have contract subs, panorama, and stipends. So these are items that, again, popped up, but they're items that probably need to be addressed on a regular basis. To your question, Julie, on school closures, you're right in that when we close schools, there are certain positions that we hold on to. What this is representing is that, yes, we would hold on to positions, but we need to turn around and put them right back into the new Brockbank High School, or junior high. You don't have to do that, but that's how this is presented at this time is, yes, we will have savings, yes, we'll have administrators, and yes, we need to hire some administrators for the new school. So we just have lined those up just logically.
So this kind of demonstrates the cash flow, but not necessarily a savings.
Correct. This is changing from one pocket to the other. And at this point, we are receiving the requests in from the programs, and at this time, it's about $3.5 million of other programming that we are looking at and analyzing for the upcoming school year. So when you roll that all together, and again, this is just saying, hey, we're holding on to everything. We're going to do everything. We come up about $7 million short in our funding. And so that becomes the question, what do we do? We may not like $7 million, which is fine. I have the opportunity to now go into each of these areas and start trimming, if you will. This is a program, it was a state program, it's all done, it's out of our system, we're not going to worry about it anymore. If they've deprioritized it, we probably are in the same place. So it comes off the list. Or there are programs that maybe they're coming in at $5 million, but we could scale that to something around 3 or 2 or something like that. So there is an exercise to trim this, and that will happen. So that this is not your final number. Again, these are estimates anyway. But at the end, my guess is we won't trim it to 0. So we still have a question of how do we want to move forward with these requests and these challenges.
But 7 million, I mean, that number represents if we had the programming that we thought we needed.
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yep. So if
Not
we,
even like
if we
awesome,
wanted to do all these
best
things.
education ever, even where
Yeah.
just like
This is
status quo, right?
Yeah, this is avoiding cutting.
Yeah.
Because the legislature cut, and accepting the requests that are coming in at face value. That's what this represents.
It also includes a 1% COLA. 1% COLA is 5 million. So a 2% COLA would put us that much deeper. At 3%, you could do the math.
We just wanted to give you a comparison of what 1% looks like.
Correct. Yeah, this is illustrative. That's why I'm saying this isn't our target. This is not the money we have to
This is not a
come up with.
proposal in any way, shape, or form. This is just a straight up look at what numbers look like.
Yep, and what will happen in the next 4 weeks as we try to fit into whatever the revenue is that we have.
Do you have an idea about how much you trim? Like when the full ask, I guess, comes through, about how much do you end up trimming down? So how much of the 7 million will go down before we see it again? Are you anticipating?
So I have already gone through my own list, but it's in my head. It's not been vetted with anybody. But I can pull this down by about $2 million. I can explain that. I probably don't want to do that here right at this moment, but I can step it back probably $2 million without major consternations. So that's the idea for 26 is we're short, illustrated at 7 million. But as we look at the full impact of the vote and boarded leeway programs, we are losing revenue over the next several years. So we plan to receive $20 million in guarantee money for 2026. That will step down to 14 million. So we're already looking at a $6.5 million deficit in 2027 without even getting into a legislative session. I mean, we are stepping backwards. The year after that, another $6 million. So we're looking at something that is looking like we might need to talk about a tax policy. Like, how do we want to approach this? Is this something that we'll absorb? Is it something that we need to replace with other revenues, meaning through our property taxes? On top of that, we have school fees that are stepping away. Now, we have one-time money to help us get through the next several years, but by the time we get to 2029, we probably need to finish the one-time exercise and get into ongoing monies for the revenue that we will lose from school fees, which is about $1.7 million. So I'm just stretching your brains a little bit. We have this year to contemplate, but it's on the edge of 2 or 3 more years that have decreasing revenues from the state.
So Todd, on the voted and board leeway, who is saving money from that? Is it I'm assuming it's coming out of income tax, right? Like our income tax will have more, and then hopefully they'll think that they'll lower that, and then the taxpayer will save. Who's going to save?
So the source of money is income tax. So the guarantee is helping to augment your own local tax. So it's state money helping your local money. So when they don't have to give state money through this program, it's available for the legislature to direct somewhere else. We were working during the session to make sure that freed up money. So in our case, the 7 or so or $14 million when you add it all up wouldn't leave this program. And they resisted that. They did not want to commit to that money. In fact, in House Bill 2, they removed a provision that if money is undistributed at the end of one fiscal year, it gets distributed in the next year through the formula. They struck that language out. So they're capturing all of the money that's not getting distributed, but we won't know where it will go until the next legislative session.
So this 20 million that we're receiving is coming out of income tax?
Correct.
But they're saying that now, it sounds like somehow they're putting that money in a more flexible pot.
They're just not allocating it, so it can be used very flexibly.
So does it somehow come to us and then it returns to them looking like something else or being called something else?
So if I follow the pattern that they've used in the past, when this program is overfunded, they will use that money the next year to support the value increase of the WPU.
Oh, okay.
So will we see it come back? Most likely through the WPU, but it won't be this program.
But ultimately, they'll say, yes, the taxpayer is saving this money because we're lowering income tax.
I doubt I guess you could tell that story. I mean, so this will free up some $14 million. Does it become the next tax cut? Could be.
Okay.
Does it go to the WPU? Could be.
Okay.
Does it go to fund some other program?
Which could be the same story for school fees or any other cut.
Because when it's free, you can tell your own story as to where you thought the money went.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask maybe, I don't know. So it was a HB 37?
Okay. Senate bill.
SB 37, sorry.
I think.
That rerouted the money.
Oh, yes.
I don't know how to say this delicately. Is there a commitment still that they would be funding at the same amount that if it were going directly to us through that? Or would this be maybe the money that they're now going to direct towards us so that they can have that money in the different pot? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple of answers. So the first answer is that Senate Bill 37 directs $842 million that is collected or will be collected through property tax to be deposited into the state's general fund. The bill also carries language that directs the state treasurer to transfer the equal amount that they receive, so that $842 million, to the State Board of Education as income tax dollars. So the first question is, we will get the money. It will just change its color. It will go from a property tax piece of money to an income tax piece of money through this mechanism. So it's a bunch of accounting.
So once it's an I'll tell you why. Once it's an income tax, though, can they then say, oh, we have plenty of income tax, we're going to give you a refund? So can they refund that then?
So that transfer doesn't accomplish that purpose. The question, it sets the stage for the next process, which is we get to next year and say there's income tax growth. Let's say there's $100 million of new money. Well, under the Constitution, that could only go to a couple of places. But if the legislature has needs over in a non-eligible program, let's call it public safety or call it transportation, they need money over there, they can now take this $100 million that they otherwise would have to give to education and run it through the general fund and free it up for those other purposes. And the vehicle that they can do that through is higher education. So they swap out higher education's funding. Instead of receiving income tax, they get this general fund appropriation, and then they start to exchange those. It's what they've been doing since 1996 when they created the education fund. It was designed to funnel money through higher education into the rest of government and circumvent the Constitution. They've just created another pathway using property tax to accomplish the same. So it impacts future years. We're not harmed, we don't lose money, we don't go backwards now because of this mechanism. It just opens the door for up to $842 million to get funneled through another mechanism into general government, which is kind of what Amendment A was trying to accomplish. This is just a backdoor approach, and it's limited. It's only $842 million. It's not the whole collection of income tax. So that's a complicated answer, but that's...
Thanks for putting a positive spin on it, Todd.
I did work for state government at one time. I think I fought against public ed in a couple of meetings. Anyway. I know, I'm a turncoat. The days when I worked for community and economic development. I got some stories to tell. All right, so as we look at the challenge for the 26 year and knowing that we have challenges on revenue into the next several years, we want to take a look at tax policy. So I'm going to run you through some perspectives and then talk about what our levies are doing for us right now. I always love to talk about taxes, but I always get myself in trouble because of the words I use and the way I say things. So I'm going to try and set some frameworks here so that I don't get in a lot of trouble. The first one is, the first framework or perspective is tax rate. All the way up until about the mid-'80s, taxing entities, school boards would talk about taxes in terms of mill rates, or just, we call them tax rates today, but a percentage of tax. That's how you would have your conversation with the community. Hey, we're going to raise your taxes 5%, or something like that. But it was all about the rate. If we weren't going to change your rate, we weren't increasing your taxes, because we were measuring it by the tax rate. And in fact, today, even after the 80s, there are several state programs that key off of tax rate. And if you increase your tax rate, often now called tax effort, you get more state money. And if you decrease your tax rate, you get less state money. It's kind of like what we're seeing with the voted in board. They've taken the hold harmless away, so the rate's going to come down. It's a rate-driven conversation. But that's the history, that's the perspective. Your rate, if you don't change it, you didn't change taxes. And if you increased your rate, you increased taxes. And if you decreased your rate, you decreased your taxes. That's how that conversation went for many, many, many years. And then in the 80s, the truth in taxation process, or the certified tax process, was introduced to some degree to overcome the misperception that, well, even though you hold your tax rate the same, if my property values go up, I'm paying more taxes. So let's have some truth about what's really happening. So they changed the measure from rate conversation to revenue. So now if you assess your taxes in a way that you get the same revenue next year as you did this year, you didn't raise taxes. So that's now the framework is, how do you measure a tax increase? Well, it's all about revenue. Did you increase your revenue? If you don't increase your revenue, then you didn't raise taxes. Doesn't matter what your rate did. Your rate could have gone all over the place. But if you're not generating more revenue, you didn't generate more tax. Does that make sense on a revenue basis? Then we get to the taxpayer perspective. And the taxpayer just simply looks at their tax bill and says, I paid $500 last year, and now I'm paying $550 this year. You raised my taxes. Doesn't matter what the rate was, doesn't matter what the revenue was, they're looking at their tax bill and saying, it went up, so you raised my taxes. And that has some challenges to it, because why the rate, or why your tax went up, depends on some different things. So back in the old days, we could take a look at someone's tax notice and say, hey, we told you we didn't raise your taxes because our tax rate is the same from one year to the next. And the only reason you're paying more money is, oh, look, your assessed valuation went up. So we didn't raise your taxes. The tax assessor raised your taxes because our rate stayed the same. They just appraised, or they said your house is of greater value. Sorry, not our fault. Go talk to the tax assessor and go have them, readjust and take that away. That got complicated when we got into the world of the certified tax rate, because the certified tax rate now takes the aggregate of all the properties in a taxing jurisdiction and does this calculation on the revenue to say, what was your revenue last year? What did your assessed valuations go up to? Oh, we're going to have to drop the tax rates to keep it the same because you've had appraisals go up. If you're an individual homeowner, and let's say your individual property went up 5%, but the average calculation for everybody in that jurisdiction was 2%, the certified rate didn't help you. In fact, you are going to pay more taxes because the certified rate is on this aggregate level. It's not on the individual taxpayer's level. So that's where the Brians and the Todds of the world get to talk to taxpayers, and we have to figure out, oh, the certified rate only went up 5%, but look, your assessed valuation went up 10%. And we're back to the old conversation. You got to go talk to your tax assessor and have a conversation with them as to why your property went up. But it wasn't because the school district had raised your taxes. This is just an artifact of how the tax rate is calculated. And it gets it's frustrating. And so when we have our tax hearings, the Brian Ipsons and Todd Hobbs of the world are asked to field questions. And we're trying to figure out, okay, what perspective did the question come from? What perspective do I need to give the answer from? And how do we reconcile those two worlds? So it's just challenging. And so we can have conversations saying, hey, we didn't raise any taxes this year. Sure enough, someone's tax got raised. It's gonna happen. There's a fourth perspective. I don't know if I should get into the fourth perspective or not. Let's do it. You all look like you're only half asleep, so I'll put you the rest of the way to sleep. The fourth perspective is a legislative perspective. So each of our levies has rules around them. So your debt service levy has rules around it, your capital levy, your voted and board. And they, from their perspective, when they look at these discrete levies, they say if any one of those changes, then you have a tax increase. So we might say, hey, we're going to take our debt service, some of our debt service levy, and go slide it over to our capital levy, which is what we've been doing for the last couple of years. From the legislative perspective, they say, no, you raised your taxes. You got to go through truth and taxation because you took it out of this world and you put it over in this other world. But from the revenue framework, we're taking the $1 that was over here and we're just going to assess it over here. So it's the same dollar, just a different bucket. We didn't raise taxes. But the legislative perspective says, yes, you did, because your debt service could have been refunded back to the taxpayer when you finished paying your bond payments. And then you raised it on your capital levy, so you actually did raise your levies. And so that's why we go through truth and taxation, is it's that perspective. Could have given it back, and you decided to collect it anyway. Does that make sense? So there's, that last perspective is the one that we probably have the hardest time trying to explain to taxpayers is, wait, it's the same dollar, it's just coming from a different levy. We're okay. But maybe we're not.
So Todd, barring, what the example that you just gave, when we increase the tax rate, that it triggers truth and taxation. It's
not the rate, it's the revenue.
Oh, it is the revenue.
It is still the revenue. But now it's being triggered because it went from one bucket to another, because we would say the revenue is the same. It's $1 here, $1 here. I didn't raise taxes. My revenue didn't change. But the legislature comes in and says, well, this came from this bucket, and now you're going to take it from this other bucket. So that does trigger truth and taxation. So that's where, again, depends on what perspective you want to look at it through. From the district's perspective, a dollar is a dollar. But from that legislative perspective, a tax rate or a tax levy is a different tax levy.
Todd, can you confirm, so we've had truth and taxation for the last several years because of the moving of the buckets, but we've also frozen which rate? The certified rate?
So we've frozen between two rates. So in our efforts of the pay-as-you-go process, we have two dynamics going. The first one is one I've described, where the principal and interest payment or the debt service payment won't be collected over in the debt service levy. We're going to collect that over on the capital levy. So that's where, from that perspective, it's flat. Same dollar, just different bucket. On top of that, by freezing the rate, we are capturing, or we're circumventing the certified tax rate process, because the certified tax rate process would say if valuations went up, your rate should come down, but we're holding on to that. And so that does generate more revenue. So it's not just the same dollar bucket story. It is a new dollar, because we're not letting the certified rate pull that down. So that is also a tax increase.
Yeah, so we've done both.
But by design, we've done both. And so I've got a chart here. So this is back when the bond proposition was put together. On this, you can see the high point of our debt service payments was at 60 million. And so if we only did that first part of the story, which is we're going to take the money from the debt service and put it over in the capital, it would have just flatlined at 60 million. It would have only been 60 million. But that's not enough money to support the full future costs of the pay-as-you-go program, because we have inflationary costs of construction. So built into that was also to capture additional revenue that would grow, and the mechanism was to freeze the combination of the two rates at that level, so that we then have an upward slope on this line. It's not just flat at 60, but it grows because our construction costs would also grow into the future. So that was by design.
And to be clear, that was, I mean, I wasn't on the board at the time, and so maybe you two can speak to that. It wasn't necessarily, like, as a voter, I didn't read that, but when they came out to the community, that was presented that said, these are the models, this is the one that you're going to vote on, and what we would do is we would continue to keep that rate where it's at so that we would continue to grow the revenue. So it's not subject to the rate change, correct? That's what, so as we voted on it, we knew that.
The board has to take action to hold it at that flat rate. You have to choose to do that every year.
Was that just part of the understanding, or was that part of what was on the voter?
So your voter information pamphlet would not have gone into that kind of detail, because the voter information pamphlet is all about why are you raising the principal and interest or your debt service levy, and that was to pay for 5 schools that was on the voter information pamphlet. Okay. The rest of the story would be happening probably outside of the voter information pamphlet, as you have your different community meetings, and I see a couple that might want to jump in here, because I wasn't part of those conversations. But the voter information pamphlet is prescribed by law, and it actually would have told everybody, we're going to raise your taxes because you're going to increase the principal and interest payment source of money.
So to clarify for the public's sake, whoever might be listening or might listen to this hereafter, yes, and we have that documentation that shows the information we provided in 2016 on the different options. And then as part of the 2017 bond, there was a voter information pamphlet that talked about the tax increase in and of itself, but then also the 40-year strategic plan and how the rate would be preserved and the revenue retained after the bonds were paid for, so that we could administer this 40-year strategic plan.
Yeah, and this particular slide comes from those conversations.
That actual, yeah.
So this isn't my creation. I've pulled it from documents back in 2017.
You can see this has got Dale Okerlund's logo up there.
LYRB,
yeah.
Our financial advisor.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, the public never voted on that plan. That's the board who votes on that plan. Right? The public voted to approve bonds.
Correct.
Did not vote to approve this financial model.
Yeah, I think that's correct. But I think the board or the community voted on that plan knowing that our intention was to continue to maintain that revenue, because we were very clear that there would be future truth in taxation and that we would be shifting that revenue over to our long-term capital plan but to your point, the reason why I'm so willing to articulate it again and again and again is because as soon as somebody voted for that bond, they forgot that we were going to do that.
Well, and also, Ben, as much as, I witnessed how much you guys worked to make sure and get the word out, right? But the verbiage on the ballot it only spoke about the bond money, right? It didn't speak about this second part.
Yeah, so to Kim's point, the actual voter authorization was for the bond itself. By virtue of the fact that they continue to vote for you, and it's because you've committed to make this plan work, right? That was the commitment to voters overall, even though they didn't have a direct say in this year to year.
Also, there was no, when we worked hard and went out to the communities, I can't even remember how many dozens of meetings we did. The intent was never to try to trick the public. It was never trying to hide this. In fact, it was quite the opposite. We were very, here's some options, here's what each one of these means. And then a lot of that was the feedback, you know, that we got from those community meetings. So I just want to be clear that there was never this desire, if you're thinking that, to slide it by the public and not have them understand. If they went to any of our meetings and took that opportunity to be educated on what we were trying to do, what the end goal was, a few different pathways, that information was discussed, not only like written in this little paragraph in small print, it was part of our discussion.
You can actually still see all these peripheral materials on the GSD Future website under the bond section. And there's a Facebook page that has all of our videos and peripheral materials that advertise what we were going to do after that full long year campaign to educate the community and give them some feedback. We did a formal survey through Y2K. They came out, and that's the plan that the community told us they wanted us to go for. So while they didn't formally vote for it, the survey indicated that they supported that plan.
All right. I will just flip through a couple slides here because I was told that we're done at 7. So the question often comes up, how much headroom do we have in our taxes? So this is representing the voted and board with some technicalities in there, but we basically have about $61 million still available in the voted and in the board about $37 million. So that's, as we start to chip away, you know, you think, $7 million, $21 million, that's going to take up most of the board local levy. That starts to feel uncomfortable because you get close to your max, because then that restricts future abilities to balance budgets because it's just not available anymore. So you want to keep that in mind, you know, that there actually is a ceiling in that particular levy. Same on the capital. We have about 70 million headroom left in that levy. And so as we move forward in our pay-as-you-go program, that will slowly be used into the future years. On both slides, or I guess on this slide, you'll see that to increase taxes by $1 million hits a taxpayer of a primary home about $5.94. So you can do some mental math there as you look at, if I have to raise taxes by $7 million, multiply it basically by 6, and that's what the impact would be on a taxpayer of their primary home. So just some tools there for you. The last piece, as we come into the final stretch of our budget conversations, we teed this up last time when we talked, and this has to do with our deferred maintenance or our regular capital. So the first hour we've talked about new builds, remodels. This is prospective, changing the properties, the facilities. But we also have all of the responsibilities to keep those properties maintained and moving forward. Regular replacements of systems. And when we look at that, and this is, again, an estimate based on the top 10 analysis that Don does with his group, we got behind on deferred maintenance by $58 million. So we have a real challenge, and this will also be an element that we need to take up as we go through the budget process, is what will the appetite be to start to work down that deferred maintenance amount? How do we keep the facilities we have in place operational and working well until the day comes that they're either rebuilt or they go through a significant remodel? And so this is just a real life page. We really need to figure out what our capital program will be beyond just new builds and remodels. And I turn it back to you.
Any further questions, discussion?
Yeah, how did we discover that 58 million of deferred revenue, deferred costs?
Well, it's not a discovery. It's plain every year that we have $9 million to fund requests, and our requests vary between 50 million a year and 70 million a year.
Okay, yeah,
So when the FCI scores were done back in 2015-16, we had a $1 billion deferred maintenance calculation. Add inflation onto that, and we're close to $2 billion. So this is just, each year it expresses itself in what we really would like to do versus what we can do. And I would call these $58 million chunks not our nice to haves. They're not a lot of wants. These are the needs that we're falling behind upon. So it's just the continual expression of this. So for example, a re-roofing project at Churchill, we did 3 segments of 11. We divided it into 11 segments to replace that roof in stages because we can never afford a complete re-roof. Cottonwood High School, we probably have divided it into 20 segments because we can't afford the millions of dollars to do it in one fell swoop. We're managing what we can based upon $9 million. So
cash flow.
Yeah, my predecessor 15 years ago had the exact same capital budget as I do. His dollars went a lot farther than mine.
This discussion maybe we should have had when we talked about this specific thing in a study session, but I think that just it occurs to me, are there other shortfalls that we're not aware of? Because in the 4 years that I've been here, I was not aware of this problem. And so when I saw in the budget 9 million, I went, yeah, we've been doing that, so it works, it's great. And I didn't know. And so I guess I'm saying to myself, gosh, now I'm worried there are other places where we have shortfalls like this that eventually you're going to come and say, like technology, although I did see that in the projects area, so I'm glad to see that because I wasn't aware we were putting aside money like that for technology. Well, I was a little bit. That was good to see to me. So I don't know, I just want to ask the question of you specifically, Todd.
Yeah, so I'm going through the effort to try to discover those things. I've gone through different aspects of even our insurance programs and how we're paying for the current wellness center and whether we have the right financial strategy in place and don't have a surprise even in that world. So as I trip through and find things, they're getting teased out. And so this is the one that is significant enough that we need to talk about. Is it the only thing? I don't know yet, but I'll keep looking.
And is this something that has been being put off forever, but everybody was just sort of like, well, yeah, we did that. And then you said, no, we can't continue this. Is this what happened?
To a degree, some of this is observing that we're in crisis management mode and we're using economic triage to deal with things. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't.
And Don, I'm going to actually re-say I'm going to assume Don's been ringing the bell forever. Because I do know that's been happening. I didn't want to pretend like that wasn't happening. Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions? Okay.
I guess I wonder, so where do we go from here?
Yep, so perfect. So the next steps are, under statute, the superintendent has a responsibility to submit what's called a tentative budget by June 1st. So we will take all of this exercise that we've shared with you today and any input that you have along the way, and we will put that tentative budget together and have that available to you by June 1st, and it's also available to the public as well. That becomes the baseline, and in many cases, that becomes the budget that then is presented to the board at its adoption hearing. So that's where we are at this point. So we'll go through our internal review, put a proposal together that will come to you.
And the colorful budget that you showed up there, you presented that to legislators at Capitol Hill? Is that what I heard you say?
Not to legislators in that format. We definitely gave feedback on all the programs that were being cut or defunded. That is for us. So I put it together for our conversation.
I thought you said that they asked Granite to show them, like, how did the session impact them? Did I get that wrong?
So I was asked by the governor's office to represent what the Grant School District impact was, and so I gave them this page. So not the multicolored one. I gave them this and said,
Okay.
this is what the session did for Granite, and that's why I left the voted and board on there at its full impact, because that's what's really happening to us. It'll take a few years to get there, but that's really what happened this session to Granite School District.
Once we had a base idea of this information, I did share a rough summary, and I think
Okay.
you guys were CC'd on that message that went to our legislators and a handful of other legislators who expressed interest. I didn't want to get to our budget luncheon and have them be like, wait, what? Why didn't you tell us about this? And obviously there was very little that could be done on that front on the last day of the legislative session, but we wanted them to be aware of what those impacts were.
Did you have any reach out to you?
I had a couple legislators reply, and then a few after the legislative session when they had questions for me, and I said, I sent you an email about that, and then they said, oh, there it is. Oh, crap, okay. So there was a handful of folks that I did communicate with.
So then in spring, we'll have a conversation we'll invite legislators over for the budget luncheon. And we'll also be having our own conversations with them. And then we as a board will be discussing this basically, I would think, ongoing until June, because we'll be doing negotiations, we'll be making decisions about funding cuts, right? And do those take place well, obviously negotiations takes place in executive session. Does the rest take place in executive session as well?
So to Todd's point, between now and that June statutorial deadline, it's up to the board to determine how much they want that conversation to happen in a study session or in other places. So the expectation is that I'll start to communicate some ideas to you and suggestions, and then we'll have some other conversations offline. But if there was a desire to come back and do this again in April and May, we can certainly accommodate that.
I think I want to just send the message that I'm thinking about public people who are listening, that this is a really collaborative effort.
Yes.
This is something that we talk about a